What advice would you give to aspiring consultants?
Consulting career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you treat this career as a sprint, you're probably gonna die early in the career, right? If you treat it as a marathon, if you keep the pace, you understand that all things they pass, you're always gonna get through.
What are you doing now? How did this come about?
So right now I'm working at World Food Program. It's an agency, an outside agency, but inside the UN system. So how the UN works is like there's the UN word, and then all the blue helmets and people like doing work in all countries. This could be some work in terms of war helping, food helping, construction, um, politics, everything UN does. And then there's some other bodies that are part of the UN word, but they are separate agencies. And World Food Program is one of those agencies. And then World Food Program basically is a organization that has one very particular goal, which is ending hunger by 2030. It's pretty amazing to try to reach that because right now we have about 150 million people that has some problems with food, and that those from those 150 million people we are reaching right now around 150 million. So there's still quite a lot to go, and it's huge the food problem worldwide now. And when we think about it, like most of the food problems come from conflicts, so it's not only a problem of money if you think about it. If we had endless money, even with endless money, we probably wouldn't be able to reach all those 850 million people, because there are some places that you can't reach. There's no railroads, there's no ports, you cannot get access, war is going on, like people are, so it's there's this crazy environment behind it that is not so simply as go there and deliver food. um, and then inside the World Food Program, there's a SWAT team we called Inc. division. And this Inc. division is a division of innovation, knowledge, partnership, and management, basically, which is almost like a consultancy inside WFP. And WFP is how they say World Food Program, the abbreviation. Um, and then we provide services for the WFP and also for other UN agencies and either the UN. So it's almost like we're a cell of consulting services worldwide for humanitarian acts and reasons. Um, yeah, and then right now I'm providing support to an agency that is responsible for mine action, which is after war, we have a lot of what we call explosive ordnance or any kind of explosive that is reminiscent from war that has not exploded yet. And this can cause a lot of problems, like people can be crossing the street and die. We cannot deliver food because some trucks could be like hitting a landmine. We cannot have agriculture there. So we are doing this project right now to support UNMAS, which is this agency, getting rid of like a lot, like not plus 90,000 of these explosive ordnance worldwide. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now.
Well, first of all, on behalf of all humans everywhere, thank you for your work. That sounds amazing and makes me question my life choices. Uh, are there different, with your team, your unit, are there people from different consulting agencies? How is your team put together, assembled?
Yeah, so our team is basically coming from the top tier consulting firms, but also some other private firms as investment banking or some Amazon, like some very specific top tier companies around the world. Could be consulting, could be financial, could be tech, basically. And then this team is assembled in a rotation model, which is pretty it's pretty particular, I would say, because what happens is this team was created several years ago and was assembled by some Baineys. So there's a lot of Baineys here. It's pretty um, knowledgeable through the Bain word. And then they started to put more people in, but since it's always a project based, it's easier for, and easier, it's cost wiser for the agency to do it in a rotational model. So we almost like hire, not hire, but take, like, we land consultants from the top tier consulting firms for 6 months, 8 months, 1 year rotational program, and then we give them back. And then there's a good experience for them to try to change the world. There's good incentives for them to doing that, and then they leave and come another harvest, and of course some of them in the middle of the way they stay, and then they keep the body growing, like, forward. But it's getting pretty big. We're almost more than 60 people now doing this type of work worldwide. So yeah, it's just what I'm saying, just the consulting, right, the staff. Because once we get
Right.
into a project, of course there's a lot of people from the other agencies or other areas uh, working with us, right, side by side. So then our team expands a lot. For example, right now in the environment of what I'm doing, there's like 18 chiefs, 500 people in the field. So there's like, it can get pretty massive depending on what you're doing. Yeah.
I imagine. What are some of the cultural differences between someone from Bain and someone from, say, McKinsey or BCG?
If you talk about behavior, there's, of course, there's some cultural difference, right? When so there's cultural difference everywhere, being because of the country that they coming from, because we are like a multi country team. So of course there's start with cultural difference from scratch, but then there's also cultural difference inside the different consultancies. And then, but when you think about toolkit, it's very similar. Like, people, they learned to work in a logical, inside, data driven way, and that's why also it's also applicable for investment firms, or financial market firms, or even tech firms at some point, because they all created at some point this data driven culture, that allows people to take smart, reasonable, and fast decisions, or recommendations in a very challenging, difficult, and changing setup, right? So, although there's a lot of different cultures, I would say that the toolkit is pretty similar across the board. So, yeah, it's pretty nice to know.
So you click up and work together without any problems. It's not like you're saying we should do this and you get in an argument and they're like, no,
No,
we should do
no,
this.
no. That's
Okay.
And of course, when you're coming for a humanitarian cause like we're doing here, you have a lot more of an open mind and open ways of doing things, right? There's not frameworks and by the book stuff for everything we're doing. It's way different from what we do at Bain, for example, that we have for some project we already have some proof frameworks and ways of working, or way of solving that thing, right? That we try to embody it, of course, create things very specific to the case by case scenario, but there's something behind. When we think about humanitarian causes, this is so much more changeable. I cannot control
Hmm.
when a bomb explodes. It's just not in my
Yeah.
control.
Right.
Um, so the way that you use framework and the way that you use data is a bit different as well. So everyone is more open to, like, think outside the box, to change more, to adapt more. um, so this is more of the analytical part, right? And then on the other hand, there's the huge gap between private companies and public sector, right? That you also have to take in consideration. Like, things in the public sector, they need to move a bit slower because you have a lot of stakeholders, you have a lot of things going on. Uh, every recommendation needs to go through a lot of validation before it goes forward, because this could impact in politics, this could impact in worldwide issues that it's not that it could go wrong. So you need to be very careful inside the UN world, to make sure that you're making things that there's no regret moves.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah. It's a symbol in many ways.
yeah.
And your team sounds interesting. It sounds almost, are you familiar with IDEO, design thinking firm in San Francisco?
No.
Okay. It's similar to how you described your unit. they take people from like thought leaders from different industries and put them on a team together, like a consulting team, to come up with solutions to problems such as redesigning the shopping cart or creating a new way of laying out a city or something like that. Some problem they're given, and they're trying to look at it from a bunch of different angles. Of course, they'll have people from top tier consulting firms, but they might also have an engineer, or a psychologist, or like you're mentioning, your team, people coming from tech and different industries in order to come up with new solutions to the problems, existing problems that we're facing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think this could be like actually a replicable model, like thinking in some specific niches, right, throughout the industries and necessities worldwide. So I'm enjoying to see it because I've also experienced a bit of this at Bain because we also have a rotational model in what we call the ring fence or the private equity group, which is a cell inside Bain Company that works only for private equity. And there's also this rotational model from what we call the general pool, right? So they take consultants from the general pool, put inside this rotational model for 6 months, and then these people are only doing projects for the private equity industry because the projects need to be like staffed right on because you
Right.
can lose time, right? So
Yeah.
I've seen this working,
Seconds.
yeah, inside Bang, and then right now I'm seeing it working outside Bang in a very different setup and working pretty well. So it might be a good way of like having thought leadership throughout the world for specific issues, you know.
So you are taking a 6 month kind of sabbatical in the World Food Program, and then you're heading back to Bain. Is that how that works out?
Yes, it's not. It's called externship. It's kind of a sub. Like if you think about the concept behind it, it's kind of sabbatical of Bang, right? I'm working. So what consulting firms usually have is they provide you with some flexibility throughout your career, so you can test and learn and do different things, right?
That's great.
Because since we have a very like fast pushing, time intensive and stress tense career, it's good once in a while to have like those mini breaks throughout your career. So what Bain does, rule of thumb, there's no like rock defined rule, but
Okay.
every year that you work, you have kind of 1 year of flexibility of doing things, right? So after 5 years or 6 years, you can apply, for example, for a sabbatical, really, and take a leave of absence. And right now, it's getting more and more common to do it, like even without this rule of thumb. For example, depending on the business conditions. So if there is a year where the business is not so booming anymore, you have spare capacity, then you incentivize people to take out LOAs, which is leave of absence, to take out externships, to go and try to do something different, you know. So it's almost like you match um, offer and demand, right? Because and that's the dynamics, the dynamics of the business, right? Um, so I think it's pretty good model, and then externship is one of those models, and then that's what I did. But you have to, for the externship specifically, you need to apply, right? So it's not taking a sabbatical. So you need to apply, Bain has to approve, and then you need to apply also when you're going. So I had to apply to World Food Program. I had interviews. I needed to pass through the process, right? The selective process. And then after everything's fine, then I can come.
Well, well done. That's impressive. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your role in Bain's agribusiness practice. Agritech, as I understand, is one of the top industries in Brazil. Brazil are some of the experts around the world in agribusiness. And could you tell us a little bit about what you do in Bain's agribusiness practice?
Yes, of course. So I'll contextualize a bit on how Bain divides the practices and capabilities, right? So we basically, if you think about the 2 by 2 matrix, we have basically on the y-axis, we have what I call industries or practices, which is agribusiness, energy, mining, retail, CPG, consumer products, of course. And then on the x-axis, you have the capabilities, which is you want to work more in strategy, or you want to work more in private equity, you want to work more in M&A deals, in post-merger deals, like what do you want to do, you know? And then as we start our career, we are what we call generalists. So we do everything across the board. So we try to fill as many of those building blocks in this matrix. So we test and we learn, and we also learn how to adapt in different solutions, environments, industries, how people think. And then as you get more mature through your Bain life, you start choosing where you want to go, both in capabilities and industries. Normally, people would choose one industry or one or two industries and one or two capabilities, so you don't stay like so niched in one word, but you're deep enough so you can be like
Okay.
more and more and more like knowledgeable about it, about the team. And for me, it was pretty straightforward. So my career was a bit different because I am an agronomical engineer as formation, and I'm the only one ever at Bain. So as I joined Bain, I saw like this huge gap and also opportunity for me to create something that would target something that we would be acquiring knowledge before, but without having like this technician that could actually speak everyone's language inside the industry, right? So
Right.
very early in my career, I looked to some good leadership that I was inspired by, and I liked. Some of them were my friends already back then, and I asked them if we could create or recreate an agribusiness practice because it was kind of like not warm, like something like left behind. And then we pick up the practice back then, and we started building it more and more. And right now we're um, there are a lot of people at Bain that has worked with agribusiness before, and I've been having a play role that is important, like driving things forward, thinking about what are the categories that we want to go on, like what is the are the verticals inside the industry that we want to tackle, which are the clients that are driving most nice things worldwide that we should be pursuing and should be helping and should be supporting. And then there's also, of course, a global collaboration, right? Because US is super strong in agribusiness as well, and they have a super strong industry there and practice there. So we try to connect a lot with them to exchange uh, information, ways that we're seeing opportunities, challenges of the industry, right? Because usually we try to reach out clients to help them overcome some of the challenges that either the industry is coming or their specific vertical is going through. So yeah, this is like the normal operating model of a industry or a practice at Bain. And then people, of course, have different roles and responsibilities. If you are a partner, your role responsibility is going after clients and meeting clients and selling the work and making sure that you understand their pain points and asks for uh, and offers the right things for them, right? As you go lower in the chain through managers and associate partners, our job is much more to build the content to bring to the clients, right? So doing a market map, for example, something that I've done before, like mapping all the potential targets or the huge industry in Brazil with all the players that we have per vertical, with their revenue profit to understand the profit pool and the size of each vertical. We're doing, for example, proposals. We're doing IPs. So that's what more of the people below the partners they are doing, right? And I'm part of those people.
What are some of the main inputs and outputs in the agribusiness for those that are unfamiliar with the term?
When you talk about inputs and outputs, okay, let me walk you through the value chain because I think that's an easy way of saying that, because since it's almost like an egg and food chain, right? So it's huge chain.
Okay.
So there's a lot of inputs
Yeah.
and there's a lot of outputs everywhere. But let me try to explain it how it works. So first we have literally what we call like inputs, which are basically four categories, which is chemical, fertilizers, seeds, and specialties, right? So those are the big four categories of inputs, ag inputs that we have. And then we have, of course, a lot of companies doing work here, and then inside this specific building block, you could have companies doing research, you could have companies doing distribution, you could have companies like doing the creation of patents and also distribution. So there's a lot of combination here, and they are already drinking from another like part of the value chain that comes before, which is probably mining, right? Because if you think about fertilizers, part of the inputs for fertilizers come from the mining industry, with potassium, with all the different nutrients that we have for plants, right? And then after the input this, concept and distribution, we go to the farmers, and then the growers. They are a crucial part in the value chain, but they are in the middle of the value chain, because people sell the inputs to the farmers, they cultivate crops, and then they sell crops. But it's not as easy as selling crops in a worldwide business like agri. So you need tradings in the middle of the way, which is, for example, Cargill, Dreyfus, those companies that they take out Bunge, they take out the grain or the crops from the farmer, and they sell somewhere else, or they store it somewhere else. So there's also the storage business in the value chain. And then there's the commercialization, and then there's also like the making of products, right? You can make flour, you can make food, you can make a lot of things, and then you start the food process. So it's almost like you're putting input into the ground, and it's getting out food. But in this middle of the value chain is happening a lot of things.
Right.
uh, you can also add mechanization, irrigation, like a lot of things in the middle of that machinery that needs to plug inside the things, that all the services that are provided to the farmer. And then lastly, my point is linking from what you said from agtech. In all those chains of the value chain, you have agritech going on. It could be for agriculture, precision agriculture within the farmer. Could be system inside a tractor, or a harvest machine. It could be in a analysis data model for the farmer. It could be in a shipping technology for the traders, because you have so many ships worldwide. So there's opportunities all over, and techs being developed all over the value chain.
What is a specific project or initiative that has had a significant impact on the industry?
So precision agriculture is something that has really revolutionized, like, it is revolutionizing now agriculture, right? Think about it, like today everything's getting expensive and expensive, right? So it's very important to be optimized, and agribusiness and farms became industries. And if you think about industries, one thing that is like very important in industries is being optimized, being very efficient, and output efficient. So precision agriculture enabled that, right? Because instead of going there and applying fertilizer all over in a normal rate, what we're doing now is doing it. It can get to a single tree, for example. You could be putting different amount of fertilizers per single tree in a harvest field. So it's getting way more efficient. The plants, they are responding better. You get less costs, and you drive efficiency all over. I think this is the first, and then the second would be the technologies on machinery. You have autonomous machinery already. You have the machinery is collecting data that they are seeing from the field, and it's helping with inputs in the precision agriculture models. So it's almost like this loophole where everything starts from data and start getting better and better. So those are the two technologies that I would say that revolutionize more.
Do you think we'll be taking any of this stuff to space someday?
We might be. I mean, that we have still a lot to figure out inside Earth,
Right.
but I think someday, yes, for sure. We have still a lot of technology to develop inside Earth, even in Brazil, for example. Like, you have very technological farmers, but you have a lot of people that are not adopters of technology yet. So there's this huge gap, and I think there's something that is helping a lot recently, which is the generation change that we're seeing happening in Brazil, for example, which is the old grandpas are getting a bit more out, and the sons are coming and taking over, and generationally they are more open and keen to technology, right? So they're exploring more, and we see like a normal drive in productivity given that in Brazil.
Okay. As I understand it, the top consulting firms, MBB, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, have an up or out policy where every couple of years you have to prove your value, that you're continuing to grow for the company and for yourself. And you've been at Bain for almost 6 years. Could you talk a little bit about your career progression at Bain, coming in as an associate consultant and working your way up to a manager level?
Yes, of course. So the career shifts and changes the challenges a lot, right? So when you begin your career in consulting firms, you're you're working as an analyst, let's say. So you're the data person. You're looking for models. You're doing analytical work all the time. You're exercising your logical muscles. Like making sure that you're being um, MISI, what we call, like, which is mutually exclusive, and like being very focused on what drives more value. We have a lot of jargons in the industry, right? But there's one that's very common, which is the 80/20, which is basically focusing on what brings most value to the client or to the business with low effort, right? So this time in the first 2 3 years of your career is where you're exercising those muscles, those analytical tools that you have inside your head. And then as you progress to a consultant and a senior consultant, this starts changing a bit to a more how you're going to communicate the insights to the client, right? What's the storyline that you need to create? Communication is everything in our business. Sometimes you could have the right insights if you don't put them in the right order. The executive, in the other hand, is not going to understand, or is not going to feel the logical structure that you built on, and it's not going to improve take your recommendation. So as a consultant, you start paying more attention on communication style, what is the storyline that you want to make, making sure that you're making the reality checks that your and analysts are giving you the analysis on. And then as you go through manager, the challenge changes again, right? Now you have a full team for yourself. You're being responsible for cracking the answer, which is you're given the problem, right? That's when the project starts in a consulting firm. You're giving the problem. So this is the problem. So what do you do from that? And that's the manager role, right? We take the problem, we we divide the problem in a lot of smaller problems, and then we create hypotheses for every one of those smaller problems, and then we start testing those hypotheses, and then we start building back to the top with the final answer. So this, we call this cracking the case, right? But doing the crack the case, and like assigning the right team player to the right work stream, because of course people are different on what they are very good at. So managing resources and managing time and managing clients, this is something that you're thinking as a manager. So although it's very different challenges, like Bain has a very smooth way of preparing yourself for that, right? So as you go through years, you start taking a bit more from the next step. We always have a bit of the next step already in our plates. This is normal how it happens in the industry. So it makes sure that, one, you're always out of your comfort zone, which is very good for the business. Second, you're always looking for more growth. And third, you're always looking for your next step, right? Um, I think this is kind of the way that the industry is structured and the way that happens. It's also one of the reasons that creates a lot of stress.
Got it.
So there is this two-faced knife, that in one side you're growing a lot, you're learning a lot. In the other side, you're never out of you're always out of your comfort zone,
Right.
which brings more stress um, in life, right? So yeah, I think this sums up a bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. I like that kind of keeping yourself a little bit uncomfortable. There's a saying that I'm going to loosely paraphrase, but it's something like you can choose your challenges or they can choose you, but you're always going to have challenges. So it's good that you're kind of putting yourself in that situation where you're constantly growing. And it seems like you really like it. Bain has a great reputation, I understand, for a workplace. Do you think that you'll continue to become partners someday?
Yes, in the short mid term for sure. I always say that it's impossible to plan 15 years forward,
Right.
right? So if you ask myself right now, if you want to be at Bain, I want to be at Bain. This is what I like to do. I love my job. I love the company. I'm part of the company. I started back in Brazil when the company was very tiny. We're huge today, and I feel part of the thing. So it's something that drives me a lot of well-being. Um, and then partner is the next step. Let's see how it goes until there. And then it's another phase, another planning that I still don't have visibility on, right? Um,
Right.
but yes,
Fair enough.
yes, that's the plan.
As a member of Bain's Innovation Exchange Hub, can you talk a bit about different disruptors or innovators that are shaping the business landscape?
Yes, sure. So the Bain Innovation Hub, let's say, let's call it that, it's something that was created back in the time not for business sake in the first place. It was for contributing to the environment, to the innovation ecosystem, right? So what we saw a lot of times that founders couldn't speak with investors that couldn't speak with CEOs. So it had a huge communication gap between these three figures. I think today the communication gap is way smaller, especially in the investor and founder. I still think that there's a lot of gap in communication between CEOs and founders, right? Because one is the driving passion, and the other one is like I need to report results as soon as possible, right? So Bain Innovation Hub was created for that reason, to integrate and to help the gap of communication between those stakeholders. And then within that came a couple of players that I think add a lot of value to the system. One are the accelerators, right? And the accelerators, they could be from a university, they could be private, they could be from a company, they could be the hubs, for example. There are a couple of good ones in Brazil, for example, that do a lot of work there. And then there is also the innovation hubs, right, where you go and they facilitate, they provide you with a lot of expertise for you in the early stages of your startup to make sure that you grow. So I think accelerator and those innovation hubs are two key players in the ecosystem that supports a lot the founder in the beginning of their career and also in the phase of like getting bigger, right? And then as they start to getting bigger, I think comes into the ecosystem other important players, for example, VCs, right? Because in America, and this is very different from market to market, but United States, capital is very easy to get, so it's more abundant, right? So you have VCs coming to a very unproved business, or unproved business can get capital very easy. When you come to Brazil, this is way different. It's starting more now, but the VCs would come to a business only with proof technology or proof business, you know. So there's this huge things that you need to do before getting to a VC that didn't have anyone looking at before. So the accelerators and innovation hubs, I think, cover that part of the system that is very important for the overall structure.
That's really interesting. Are you familiar with BCGX?
Yes, I've heard of. I don't know in depth, but I've heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
It sounds like it might be similar, like an innovation hub.
yeah,
A lot of large corporations are exploring that as well. There's a large bank in Canada called RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada, and they have RBCX, where they can still be safe with everyone's money in the overall institution, but then they have like an innovation hub where they can test new developments and just stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And there's a lot of companies just building on that. There's a lot of private companies doing their own VCs, right? So they create this arm, this branch,
Interesting.
uh, that it's an inside VC company almost. Like you hire people that are almost investors, that are looking for technologies that could enhance the business. Uh, so those are becoming pretty popular as well, and they're pretty cool.
What advice would you give to aspiring consultants?
Um, I think there's a very good one in terms of lifestyle, which is consulting career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So if you treat this career as a sprint, you're probably gonna die early in the career, right? If you treat it as a marathon, if you keep the pace, you understand that all things they pass, you're always gonna get through. Stressful moments are good for your growth. Getting out of comfort zones is part of the job. So treating it as a big marathon where you need to go ahead and cross a lot of difficulties, I think is a good way of treating this career, and I think leads to success easier than treating it as a sprint where you just try to do as much as you can all the time because it's just impossible. You need to manage pace throughout the career.
Noted. And given your experience, what do you think the future of consulting looks like in emerging markets?
This is a very good question. I think there's a lot to grow. Like when I look to Brazil, if you compare very mature markets for consultants and emergent markets for consultancies, you see you see that emerging markets they are just beginning. US, there's mid-level companies that hire Bain, McKinsey, BCG, that understands what we do. They are big enough to pay. They have access. Like when you think about Brazil, you're just looking for top players, top players in each industry yet, and it's a huge company. Like we had this like wow moment when we mapped the industry, right? We mapped the industry and we look at the number of clients that we could have and say, wow, it's just impossible. Like we couldn't serve this many clients. But there is a lot of cultural change that that needs to take place in order for that to happen. So we need almost to develop the industry for us to have access to those clients. So I think it's just beginning, but I think there's a huge and very difficult path going forward, mostly because of cultural things. It's very hard for a mid-level founder in an emerging market to hear our fees and gets comfortable for the first time. So there is this process of giving them proof of results, of how you can help, why we
Right.
exist, why we're doing this for so long. And I think there's a lot of value to be generated there. It's just this: we need to have a very good strategy and communication toward this public. And I think right now we are still busy trying to read the top players. So there's a lot. Yeah.
Interesting. Could you discuss your approach to advising companies on strategy, marketing, organization, operations, etc., and how you balance long-term strategic planning with immediate operational challenges, especially in fast-changing industries?
So we have a very comprehensive strategic framework, right? That we use from case to case, and I think this is very dependent on the moment of the company, right? If you're a growth company, the types of challenges you're going through is much more like related to operating model, like maintaining, gaining share, and making sure that you're targeting the right categories, the right business, the right markets, right? So the type of solutions that we provide to those clients are way different from those that are already very well established, not growing a lot, that needs to maintain margin, protect the business, making sure that you're paying attention to innovation. So I think there's no one size fits all here. You need to think about the moment, the issues that each company is living, to understand and to propose a strategic path, right? And this strategic path could be in a lot of ways. This could be for operations, this could be for strategic investments, this could be long or short term strategy. Uh, Everything that you're doing, it needs to be fit to that specific case. And just one last point regarding long-term strategy that you comment on is that if you take this industry 30, 40 years ago, we would speak a lot about long-term strategy. And what we see nowadays, because of the speed that things change, that there's no such very long time strategy anymore. Like if you're looking at some tech companies that are doing long-term strategy, that takes 5 years. Like yesterday, like some years ago, we would make 30-year plan. So 10-year, 15-year plan. So those things are starting to get obsolete, right? Things are getting faster and faster. So this builds more on my approach of there's no one size fits all. You need to think about the moment, maturity, and issues that this company is living right now.
Okay. Thank you for that. So WFP.org is where people can see what's going on with the World Food Program. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to point people to follow what you're doing or anything that you'd like to highlight?
I think the WFP website, you have a lot of things. The UN is also available. It's more broad. Um, if you wanna, if you are interested in the Mine Action Services, there's the UNMAS, which is UNMAS website that also has a lot of information on that. Uh, and that's it. I think those are the main places to go look after if you are interested in on knowing about the humanitarian acts. Yeah.
Well, hey, Tor, thank you so much for talking with us today. It was really interesting to get a little insight into a top tier consulting firm and what you're doing for the world with the World Food Program. And
Thanks.
really,
Thanks,
really
David.
interesting interview.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Nice to meet you. And it's incredible the work that you guys are doing. I appreciate being part of it, and I wish the best of luck.